The carriage struggled through the snow-covered path as wind howled mercilessly through the ancient trees of Derbyshire. Inside, 26-year-old Lady Eleonora Winfield held her younger sister Sophia close to her chest, both trembling not merely from the bitter cold seeping through the wooden slats, but from the terrifying knowledge of what awaited them. The storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos that had consumed their lives since their father's sudden death 2 months prior. When the harsh command came from outside to stop, Eleonora's heart sank. She recognized the voice of Bartolome, their Uncle Lord Reginald Winfield's most loyal servant, a man who had once served their father with apparent devotion. The cruel irony was not lost on her that the same hands that had once helped her into this very carriage as a child were now orchestrating their doom. "You cannot do this to us," Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. At 19, she still possessed an innocence that made this betrayal all the more devastating. "We are the daughters of the Count of Thornfield." Eleonora's response was bitter with the wisdom that tragedy had forced upon her. "It means nothing to them anymore. Sister, since Uncle Reginald produced that fraudulent will, we have become nothing more than obstacles to his complete control of our inheritance." The carriage door burst open, allowing a violent gust of wind and snow to assault them like frozen daggers. Bartolome stood silhouetted against the white wilderness, unable to meet their eyes as he delivered his master's sentence. "Get out, both of you, now!" The landscape that greeted them was utterly desolate. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, at least a meter deep, while the worst winter storm in decades raged around them. Ancient trees bent under the weight of ice and wind, their branches reaching toward the gray sky like the desperate arms of the dying. "We will freeze to death out here," Eleonora protested, though she knew her words fell on deaf ears. "This is murder, plain and simple." Bartolome's face showed a flicker of the man who had once told them bedtime stories, but it vanished quickly. "I have my orders from Lord Reginald. The ladies must disappear without a trace. I have a family to feed, and your uncle pays well for loyalty." They were forced from the carriage wearing nothing but the fine silk dresses they had donned for what they believed would be a simple visit to their uncle's estate, along with thin shawls wholly inadequate for the murderous weather. When Sophia begged for even a blanket or some food, Bartolome looked away in shame. "If you somehow survive this," he said, his voice barely carrying over the wind, "never return to claim what you think is yours. Lord Reginald has made it clear that any who appear making such claims will find themselves in an asylum, or worse." The crack of a whip sent the horses lurching forward, and within moments, the carriage had disappeared into the swirling snow, leaving the two sisters utterly alone in the wilderness. Sophia collapsed against Eleonora, sobbing as tears froze on her cheeks. "What are we going to do?" she cried, her voice breaking with despair. Eleonora surveyed their impossible situation, feeling terror threatening to overwhelm her completely. But then, through the blinding snow, she glimpsed something that might have been salvation, or merely a cruel trick of her desperate mind, a faint light flickering in the distance among the trees. "We walk," she said, taking her sister's trembling hand. "We walk or we die. And I swear to you, Sophia, if we survive this night, we will have our revenge. Our uncle will pay for every snowflake that has fallen upon us." Unknown to the sisters, their salvation was already approaching through the storm. Alexander Blackwood, once the respected Duke of Ravenscroft, rode through the forest like a ghost from a more glorious past. His tall, imposing figure cut through the white landscape atop his black stallion, Storm, both man and beast struggling against the elements. For 3 years, London society had declared him dead to them. 3 years since accusations of treason against the crown had destroyed not only his reputation and fortune, but his very identity. At 35, Alexander had learned to live with exile, hidden away in the deteriorating remains of his ancestral estate in the remotest part of Derbyshire, where curious eyes rarely ventured and questions were never asked. "Easy, Storm," he murmured to his horse as they fought through a particularly vicious gust. "This blizzard grows worse by the hour. We must reach shelter before the path becomes completely impassable." It was then that movement in the snow caught his attention. At first he assumed it was an injured deer or perhaps a lost sheep, but as he drew closer his blood ran cold. Two human figures stumbled through the drifts, clinging to each other as they fought against the storm's fury. "Dear God," he breathed, spurring Storm forward. When the women saw him approaching, they tried to flee, their fear of strangers apparently greater than their need for rescue. "Please, do not be afraid," Alexander called out, his voice commanding yet gentle. "I mean you. No harm." As he dismounted and approached them, he could see they were young ladies of obvious quality, dressed in clothes suitable for a drawing room, but utterly inadequate for survival in such conditions. The elder held the younger, who appeared barely conscious, her lips blue with cold. "My sister," the conscious woman said through chattering teeth, her dignity intact despite their desperate circumstances. "Please, I beg you, help my sister." Alexander's military training allowed him to immediately recognize the symptoms of severe hypothermia. Without hesitation, he removed his heavy coat and wrapped it around the unconscious girl, then lifted her slight form effortlessly. "She will die if we do not get her to warmth immediately," he said with grave urgency. "My estate is perhaps 30 minutes' ride from here. Can you manage to stay mounted, miss?" "Lady Eleonora Winfield," she replied, maintaining her composure, even in extremity. "And this is my sister, Lady Sophia." The surname struck Alexander like a physical blow, though he kept his reaction hidden. The name Winfield carried with it a flood of memories, both precious and painful, but this was neither the time nor place for explanations. "You will have to trust me," he said, helping Eleonora mount behind him after securing Sophia on Storm's back. For a moment she hesitated, studying his face in the dim light. "Who are you?" she asked, though she was already accepting his assistance. "Alexander Blackwood," he replied. "Duke of Ravenscroft, or at least I was in a former life." They rode in heavy silence through the storm, each lost in their own thoughts. Alexander found himself acutely aware of Eleonora's arms around his waist, the trust she had placed in a complete stranger, and the terrible irony that the daughters of Edmund Winfield had literally fallen into his care. When Ravenscroft Manor finally emerged from the swirling snow, it appeared like a vision from a Gothic novel. The ancient stone structure remained majestic despite obvious signs of neglect and financial hardship. Gargoyles leered down from corners where scaffolding had once promised repairs that never came, and several windows showed the telltale boarding that spoke of a household reduced to heating only essential rooms. "Ravenscroft Manor," Alexander announced as they approached. "It is not what it once was in better times, but there is fire within and walls that will protect us from this storm." Jenkins, the elderly butler who had remained loyal to Alexander through disgrace and poverty, appeared at the door before they had even dismounted. His weathered face showed no surprise at his master's arrival with mysterious guests. Years of service had taught him to adapt quickly to unusual circumstances. "My lord," he said with perfect formal composure, though his eyes immediately assessed the situation. "Jenkins, this young woman is dying of cold," Alexander said curtly, carrying Sophia toward the entrance. "We need hot blankets immediately, boiling water and brandy. Every minute counts." Within moments, the sisters were installed before the great fireplace in the main hall, where a welcoming fire cast dancing shadows on walls that had once hosted some of the most elegant gatherings in England. Despite the obvious signs of reduced circumstances, the room retained an air of faded grandeur that spoke of better days. While Alexander and Jenkins worked to save Sophia's life, Eleonora found herself studying her surroundings. Ancient tapestries, though faded, still adorned the walls. Silver pieces, obviously kept polished despite everything, caught the firelight. Family portraits gazed down from their frames with the serene confidence of generations who had never imagined their descendant would live in virtual exile. "Your sister will recover," Alexander finally announced, approaching Eleonora with an additional blanket. "You are extraordinarily fortunate. A few more minutes in that cold, and we would have lost her." "Why are you helping us?" Eleonora asked, unable to suppress her natural caution. "You do not even know us." A melancholy smile crossed Alexander's face, and Eleonora noticed that beneath the scar marking his left cheek and the lines carved by hardship, he possessed the kind of aristocratic handsomeness that must have made him quite sought after in London society. "Because I know well what it means to be alone in the snow, Lady Eleonora," he replied quietly, "both metaphorically and literally." Dawn came to Ravenscroft Manor with hesitant light filtering through frost-covered windows. Sophia awoke disoriented in an unfamiliar chamber, wrapped in blankets that, while worn, were clean and warm. A fire crackled in the grate, and morning light revealed a room that had once been magnificent, but now showed the elegant decay that characterized the entire estate. "Eleonora?" she called weakly, and her sister appeared almost instantly with a steaming cup of tea. "Hush, we are safe," Eleonora assured her, settling beside the bed. "For now, at least." As Sophia sipped the warming tea, Eleonora recounted the events of the previous night, their rescue by the mysterious Duke, the shelter he had provided, and the questions that remained unanswered about their host. "A Duke?" Sophia asked. "The Duke of Ravenscroft? I remember Father mentioning that name once, though not favorably." Eleonora frowned, trying to recall the context. "Yes, I remember too. Something about a scandal, though I never learned the details. The question now is whether we can trust him." "Do we have any choice?" Sophia asked practically. "We are miles from anywhere without money or resources, and Uncle Reginald's men could be searching for us." A gentle knock interrupted their conversation. Jenkins entered with his antiquated but perfectly executed bow. "Good morning, ladies. His Grace requests the honor of your company for breakfast if you feel sufficiently recovered." The dining room maintained vestiges of its former glory despite obvious economies. The long oak table gleamed with polish, silver candelabras stood ready for evening meals, and an imposing portrait dominated one wall, presumably Alexander's father, judging by the resemblance. However, the worn upholstery and patched curtains told the story of a household making do with much less than it had once enjoyed. Alexander awaited them beside the fireplace, and in daylight, Eleonora could better appreciate his presence. Tall and powerfully built, with features that suggested both intelligence and determination, he carried himself with the unconscious authority of generations of breeding. The scar across his cheek, rather than detracting from his appearance, lent him an air of dangerous romanticism. "Lady Sophia," he said with a slight bow, "I am relieved to see you recovered. I feared for your life last night." "I owe you my gratitude, sir," Sophia replied, still somewhat shy in his presence. "Alexander, please," he corrected gently. "Titles have little meaning within these forgotten walls." As they settled at the table where Jenkins served a modest but carefully prepared meal, Alexander's expression grew serious. "I assume you are wondering about me," he said directly. "Stories of my disgrace will have reached even such refined ears as yours." "We know very little, actually," Eleonora admitted, meeting his gaze steadily. "Only that there was some kind of scandal, an elegant way to describe complete social destruction," Alexander replied with bitter humor. "I was accused of treason 3 years ago, conspiracy, espionage, selling military secrets to the French. All lies, naturally, but sufficient to destroy my name, my fortune, and my position in society." "Did you not attempt to defend yourself?" Sophia asked. "Oh, I tried," Alexander said, taking a sip of tea. "But when evidence is fabricated by someone with sufficient power and influence, and when you lack allies willing to risk their own reputations, defense becomes rather academic. Society finds a spectacular fall far more entertaining than a tedious protest of innocence." He leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "Now, what of you? Last night you mentioned betrayal, Lady Eleonora." "Our uncle, Lord Reginald Winfield," Eleonora replied after a moment's hesitation. "After our father's death 2 months ago, he produced a will that disinherited us completely. When we questioned its authenticity, he decided it was simpler to eliminate us entirely. He had us taken." "To the middle of nowhere and abandoned in a blizzard," Sophia added bitterly. "Left to die of exposure." Alexander sat motionless, his expression unreadable. "Thornfield," he repeated slowly. "You are the daughters of Edmund Winfield, the Earl of Thornfield." "Did you know our father?" Eleonora asked, surprised by his reaction. Alexander rose and walked to the window, turning his back to them as he gazed out at the snow-covered landscape. "I knew him," he replied in a carefully neutral tone. "A long time ago." The following days passed in strange suspension. The storm continued, keeping them effectively isolated from the outside world. Alexander spent long hours in his study, emerging only for meals and brief, formal conversations. Eleonora often caught him watching her with an intensity that was both disturbing and inexplicably thrilling. One afternoon, while exploring the extensive library, Eleonora became aware of a presence behind her. She turned to find Alexander standing so close she could smell his distinctive scent of sandalwood and leather. "You enjoy reading?" he observed. Not a question, but a statement. "It was my mother's greatest pleasure," she replied, acutely conscious of his proximity yet strangely drawn to it. "She taught me to value books above jewels." "A wise woman," Alexander murmured, reaching past her to take the volume she had been holding. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending an unexpected shock through both of them. "Your father was also a man of letters," he commented. "We had that in common. You speak of him as though you knew him well." Alexander looked directly into her eyes, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Well enough to know he would be proud of his daughter's courage," he replied enigmatically, "and well enough to understand that his death may not have been as accidental as everyone believes." That night Sophia crept through the darkened corridors of Ravenscroft Manor. She had waited until she was certain everyone slept before undertaking her clandestine search for answers. Too much remained unexplained about their host, and their survival might depend on understanding the full truth. Alexander's study was austere but elegant, clearly the room where he spent most of his waking hours. Moonlight filtered through tall windows, casting ghostly shadows across the solid oak desk. Sophia began methodically examining drawers, careful to leave everything exactly as she found it. In the third drawer, hidden beneath seemingly unimportant papers, she discovered what appeared to be an old leather journal. She opened it with trembling hands, aware she was violating their host's privacy, but convinced their lives might depend on what she learned. Her gasp echoed in the silent room when she recognized the familiar, elegant handwriting that filled the yellowed pages. It was her father's script, unmistakably. She began reading fragments by moonlight, her heart pounding as pieces of a terrible puzzle began falling into place. October 1810. Alexander has accepted my proposal. The plan is dangerous but necessary if we are to expose the conspiracy threatening the crown. I trust him more than any other man. His loyalty is beyond question. December 1810. The trap is set. Blackwood will infiltrate Wellington Circle as a supposed French sympathizer. If we succeed, we will discover who has been leaking military information to Napoleon. Sophia turned pages frantically, her pulse racing as the truth emerged. March 1811. Disaster. The operation has been compromised. Alexander has been accused of the very crimes we sought to expose. I have tried to defend him, but my own position is now precarious. Reginald suspects. The final entry, dated just weeks before their father's death, made Sophia gasp aloud. May 1811. I am being poisoned slowly. I confirmed it today. My own brother. For the fortune, for the title. I will not live much longer. I have sent evidence to Alexander, hidden where Reginald will never find it. My daughters, how to protect them when I am gone? Dear God, Sophia whispered, dropping the journal. Father was murdered, said a grave voice from the doorway. And the Duke was working with Father as a secret agent, both betrayed by the same man. Sophia spun around to find Alexander's imposing figure silhouetted in the threshold. He did not appear angry, merely deeply weary. I should have realized that Edmund's daughters would inherit his perceptiveness, he continued, entering slowly. Your father was my mentor, Lady Sophia, and my dearest friend. The journal. Why did you hide this from us? Because I could not be certain I could trust you, he answered honestly. Betrayal leaves deep scars, and because this information could put you in mortal danger. We are already in mortal danger, Sophia replied bitterly. Our uncle tried to murder us. I know, and now I understand why. Alexander seated himself heavily in his chair, studying Sophia intently. Your father sent me documents before he died. Evidence against Reginald, not only of his betrayal to the crown as a French spy, but of the forged will and the poisoning. At that moment, the study door opened again, revealing Eleonora. Her green eyes shone with a mixture of surprise and determination. I heard enough, she said, entering the room. Where is this evidence? Alexander looked at her with an expression, mixing admiration and something deeper. Hidden, he replied. Your father was brilliant with puzzles. His letter mentioned a hiding place, where angels weep for the past and the future reveals itself to those who have eyes to see. The family. Chapel, Eleonora said without hesitation. In the crypt there is a weeping angel statue over our ancestor's tomb, and beside it a stained glass window depicting the Last Judgment. Alexander stared at her in amazement. How can you be so certain? Because Father took us there every year, on the anniversary of Mother's death. He used to tell us that there, past and future came together. We must recover that evidence, Alexander declared. It is our only hope of clearing my name and restoring what rightfully belongs to you. The first light of dawn barely appeared on the snowy horizon when 3 riders secretly departed Ravenscroft Manor. Alexander rode ahead, his upright figure radiating a determination he had not displayed in years. Behind him, the Winfield sisters maintained pace, wrapped in dark cloaks Alexander had found in some forgotten chest. We will need at least 2 days to reach Thornfield if the weather holds, Alexander explained, slowing his pace so Eleonora could ride beside him. We should stop at old McGregor's Inn by nightfall. He is a discreet man who owes me certain favors. Eleonora nodded, studying Alexander's profile against the pale sky. In just a few days, this man had transformed from complete stranger to their only ally, and to her consternation, something else she dared not name. What will happen when your innocence is proven? She asked quietly. Will you return to London, to the social life that was taken from you? Alexander looked at her with an indescribable expression that made something flutter in Eleonora's chest. There was a time when that was all I desired, he finally answered. Revenge, vindication, reclaiming my position. But now... His voice trailed off as he turned his gaze toward the road ahead. Isolation changes a man, Eleonora. It teaches him what is truly important. Eleonora, she corrected gently. I think we have moved beyond formalities, do you not agree? A slight smile appeared on Alexander's lips, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. In that case, I insist you simply call me Alexander. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted when Sophia rode ahead to join them, pointing toward a distant village. Should we not avoid populated areas? She asked. What if someone recognizes us? Alexander suggested they detour around the village, and the sisters agreed. During a brief stop to rest the horses beside a partially frozen stream, Sophia wandered, off to gather dry kindling. Alexander seized the moment to speak privately with Eleonora. There is something I must ask you, he said, settling on a rock beside her. If your father hid evidence in the crypt, would that not be the first place your uncle searched? Eleonora smiled mysteriously. You did not know my father well enough. The crypt is merely the beginning of his riddle. Where angels weep for the past refers to the statue, but the future reveals itself to those who have eyes to see is the true key. And you understand what that means? The stained glass of the Last Judgment has a panel representing the salvation of the righteous. When the morning sun shines through it, the light projects an image onto the opposite wall. Father showed us once. It is a map. A map, Alexander repeated, impressed. Your father was always extraordinarily thorough. You admired him greatly, Eleonora observed. He was like a second father to me, Alexander confessed, his voice thick with emotion. When my parents died, he took me under his protection. He taught me about honor, loyalty, service to crown and country. Everything I became, I owed to him. Then that makes us almost family, Eleonora said, attempting to maintain a light tone despite the intensity of feelings Alexander awakened in her. He looked at her deeply. Not exactly family, Eleonora. The implicit meaning of his words sent heat coursing through her despite the cold. For one precious, terrifying moment, she thought Alexander might move closer, might even attempt to kiss her. Part of her wanted it with an intensity that frightened her, while another part warned it was inappropriate, imprudent, impossible. The sound of Sophia's return, arms full of branches, broke the spell. Alexander quickly stood, putting respectable distance between them. That evening they reached the inn Alexander had mentioned. Old McGregor, a robust man with white beard and shrewd eyes, immediately recognized the Duke despite the years that had passed. "By all the saints, my lord, they were saying you were dead or something worse." "Something worse," Alexander completed with ironic humor, "and I would prefer it remain that way. We need discreet accommodation for the night. These ladies are under my protection." In the small room assigned to them, Sophia observed the palpable tension between Eleonora and Alexander, stolen glances and seemingly casual touches that concealed deeper meanings. "Be careful, Eli," Sophia said when they were finally alone, using her family nickname. "I see how you look at him and how he looks at you." "I do not know what you mean," Eleonora replied, avoiding her sister's eyes. "Of course you do. I do not blame you. He is attractive and intriguing, but we do not know everything about him. Father trusted him, yes, but that was years ago. People change, especially after suffering as he has suffered. What are you suggesting? That he is using us? For what purpose? He is risking his own life to help us." "I am simply saying you should be cautious," Sophia insisted. "Your heart and your head must be aligned right now. We cannot afford sentimental distractions." That night, a soft knock at their door interrupted sleep. Alexander stood there with an expression of urgency and concern. "I just spoke with McGregor," he whispered. "Men have been asking about 2 young ladies in the nearby towns, your uncle's servants. Word of your survival must have reached his ears." "How is that possible?" Sophia asked. "No one knew we were alive except Jenkins, my loyal retainer," Alexander said, his face darkening. "The only man I trusted completely. We must change our plans immediately. Leave before dawn and take an alternative route." Instinctively, Eleonora moved closer to him, seeking his protection. Alexander gently placed a hand on her cheek. "I will not allow anything to happen to you," he promised in a deep voice. "Either of you." The sky dawned filled with leaden clouds promising another storm. Alexander, Eleonora, and Sophia left the inn with the first light, moving like shadows in the pre-dawn darkness. Old McGregor had provided provisions and a map showing secondary routes. "If we avoid the main roads, we can reach Thornfield from the north side, through the forest adjoining Montgomery lands," Alexander explained. "It is longer but less guarded. The Montgomerys have always been allies of our family," Sophia said hopefully. "We cannot risk trusting anyone else," Alexander replied grimly. "Your uncle is a powerful man with connections everywhere." The day passed slowly, each mile a small victory against the elements. Wind increased in intensity, bringing the first snowflakes that soon became a white curtain, reducing visibility to mere yards. "We must seek shelter," Alexander shouted over the howling wind. "The storm is worsening rapidly." "There is a hunter's cabin near here," Eleonora called back. In the clearing beside the brook, guided by Eleonora's memory, they found the small cabin almost hidden among the trees. It was rustic but solid, offering protection against the raging storm. Alexander quickly dismounted and helped the sisters, then led the horses to the small adjacent shelter. The cabin consisted of a single room with stone fireplace, rustic table with 2 benches, and a narrow cot in one corner. "It is not Buckingham Palace," Alexander commented with tense humor while inspecting the place, "but it will keep us safe until the worst passes." Hours crawled by, silence broken only by the crackling fire and the wind's howling. When Sophia, exhausted by travel, finally fell asleep on the cot, Eleonora and Alexander found themselves alone before the fire. "You should try to sleep too," Alexander said quietly. "I could not, even if I tried," she confessed. "Too many thoughts." "Would you care to share them?" Eleonora looked at him directly. "Last night at the inn, I know what almost happened. I know. He interrupted, his voice full of remorse. It was imprudent of me. I apologize. I do not want your apologies, she answered frankly. I want to understand what is happening between us, Alexander. In the midst of all this chaos, all this danger, how is it possible? Alexander released a deep sigh. I have been alone for a very long time, Eleonora. Years without trusting anyone, without allowing anyone close. And then you appeared with your strength, your intelligence, your fierce loyalty to your sister. He paused. You reminded me that there are things worth fighting for beyond mere revenge. The sudden sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered the moment. Alexander rose immediately, his hand moving to the dagger at his belt. Were you expecting someone? Eleonora asked, also standing. No one knows we are here, he replied grimly. Wake, Sophia, quickly. Alexander approached the window, wiping frost from the glass. It is your uncle's men, he said seriously. I recognize Bartolome. How did they find us? Sophia whispered, now fully awake. Someone must have seen us at the inn, Alexander replied. It matters not now. What matters is getting you both out of here alive. Alexander moved the table against the door, creating an improvised barricade. There is a trapdoor in the ceiling, leading to the attic. It is small but sufficient for you to pass through. From there, you can reach the roof and climb down the back. And you? Eleonora asked, understanding his plan. I will distract them. He replied simply. Make them believe I am alone. A thunderous blow against the door interrupted their discussion. We know you are in there, Bartolome shouted. Come out now and no one will be hurt. Alexander acted quickly, positioning the bench beneath the trap door. There is no time to argue. Go. Now. We cannot leave you, Eleonora insisted, grasping his arm. Alexander took Eleonora's face between his hands, looking into her eyes with desperate intensity. Listen to me carefully. Your father entrusted me with your safety. You must reach the crypt and find that evidence. It is the only way to end this nightmare. Before she could protest, Alexander did something that surprised them both. He kissed her. It was brief but intense, full of everything they had not been able to say. Go, he whispered against her lips. I will find you at Thornfield, I promise. With one last anguished look at Alexander, Eleonora allowed Sophia to help her up through the trapdoor. They had barely disappeared into the attic when the door burst open, and Bartolome entered with 2 armed men. The sisters made their way carefully across the roof, then dropped silently into the snow behind the cabin. Through the walls they could hear Alexander's voice, calm and controlled as he faced their pursuers alone. His sacrifice had given them the chance they needed to escape and complete their father's final mission. As they disappeared into the forest, moving toward Thornfield and the truth that awaited them in the family crypt, both sisters carried with them the image of Alexander's brave sacrifice and the promise that somehow, against all odds, they would see him again.